Focusing specifically on Colorado, there are several different avenues in which Alex's case could go. Starting at the bottom, we have municipal courts. These handle city ordinance violations, things like public intoxication, minor theft, and even things like traffic tickets. If you're here, you probably didn't commit a felony, you just annoyed your city government. These are the "you failed to mow your lawn again" courts. Then we have county courts. These deal with misdemeanors, sometimes traffic cases, and civil cases under $25,000. They also handle the first steps of lower-level felony cases, such as the advisement, the bond hearings, and even preliminary hearings. Then we have district courts. These are the big leagues. This is where felony trials happen and where you can appeal county court decisions. If Alex is convicted in a district court, he can then appeal the case to the Colorado Court of Appeals. He would do this if him and or his lawyers believed that there were ineffective assistance of counsel. He thought his lawyer sucked and did a terrible job defending him, or that the judge should have allowed evidence in, or the prosecutors were engaging in misconduct. Essentially, they can argue that Alex's due process rights were violated, and they would like a higher court to review the trial transcripts and determine whether or not Alex received a fair trial. And so appellate courts, or the Colorado Court of Appeals more specifically, is a panel of judges who will review the case. There's no jury, there's no new evidence, just three people in robes deciding whether a specific trial was a dumpster fire of legal errors. The Court of Appeals can rule on a case. They can uphold the decision, meaning that they agree with the lower court. They can also reverse and remand the decision, so they can throw out the conviction and basically set it down to the lower courts and basically say, hey, prosecutors, that evidence that you admitted was not fair and it really biased the jury, so you can't use that evidence anymore. But now you got to determine whether or not you're going to continue to prosecute Alex. So prosecutors can either drop the charges or continue to try Alex again. But if the appellate court upholds the lower court's decision, meaning that they agree with it, Alex can appeal to the Colorado Supreme Court, the state's highest court. They handle all of the appeals from the Colorado Court of Appeals, or sometimes directly from lower courts in special cases. They focus specifically on cases that require interpreting state law or the state constitution. They have what's called discretionary jurisdiction, meaning that they can refuse to hear most cases, except for death penalty cases, which will automatically go to the Colorado Supreme Court. Their rulings are the final issues on Colorado law, unless the case involves a federal constitutional question like violating a Fourth Amendment or some other violation of the Constitution. If Alex says that the police search was unconstitutional, it violated the Colorado Constitution, the Colorado Supreme Court has the last word on the case. They can review it and they will determine whether or not the law was in violation of Colorado Constitution. But if he claims that the search violated his Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution, that issue could climb the ladder and go all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, also known as SCOTUS. They sit at the top of the entire American legal food chain, 9 justices in black robes who can't be fired unless they are impeached, which basically never happens. The Supreme Court also has discretionary jurisdiction, meaning that they don't have to take the case if they don't want to. They only take about 100 out of the 8,000 to 10,000 cases that are sent up to the Supreme Court. And the cases that they generally take up are cases that have constitutional questions related to freedom of speech, due process, equal protection of the law. They also take on cases that involve conflicts between state and federal law, like if a state passed an immigration or a marijuana law that clashed with federal law. They also take on cases where there are disagreements between the lower courts, like if Colorado interprets a law one way, but Texas interprets it another. When SCOTUS rules, the decision becomes binding nationwide. This is what they call creating precedent. It's the law. So if they decide that a certain police tactic violates the Fourth Amendment, every officer in every state now has to follow that rule. And it's good that we have this form of checks and balances, because the courts exist because our founders were smart enough to know that the government shouldn't be both the accuser and the judge. Every criminal case is really this showdown between the state, who has all these resources, lawyers, badges, investigative help, subject matter experts, versus one human being, an average citizen. The court's job is to make sure that the battle happens on a fair playing field. In theory, the scales of justice are balanced. In practice, those scales sometimes look more like a seesaw on a windy day. They be biased. Courts don't just punish people, they also filter cases. They make sure the police had probable cause, that confessions weren't coerced, and that evidence wasn't obtained by some cop scope. If the government messed up your rights, courts have the power to throw that case out. It's the system reminding everyone that due process isn't optional.